All right, we're at an interesting place in our course right now. Right now, you've gone through, you've sort of struggled with the interpreter, you've built a couple of programs, and I think some of you have made some jumps now between where you were before or where you are now. And so what I wanted to do is sort of take a step out of the book. So we are sort of between chapter 3 now and chapter 4. All right, so chapter 3 was all about the interactive shell and some of the stuff that you could do in there, and I chose to kind of zoom in a little bit more and have you guys sort of make a again, make some programs and things like that, like using the shell. What I want to do is I really do think before we start talking about variables, almost as a lead into variables, what we should do is talk a little bit more about what the environment that you're actually in is basically what it actually is. So what I did is over here in the content section, I have kind of added another section here before we go much further. And I'm actually borrowing from two other sources for this. This is the textbook I typically use. This is the textbook I typically use for my systems analysis class. And I'm not going to do the entire chapter, but I'm effectively going to do just a few slides in that chapter to drill home what are the components of a system and where you are in those components. And then, and that'll probably be just this video. And then the next video, I'll probably talk a little bit about what this slide was all about, where I'm trying to basically get into the actual structure of memory. All right. So for this one, let's go. And all I'm going to do, I'm not going to do the whole chapter, so don't worry, you're not going to get a whole chapter of this. But what I am going to do is go down and talk about the components of a system. And there they are right there. So it looks like I don't have my Steam account loaded up. But if I was to basically say, what are the components of Doom, which is a video game, and my apologies if you're not into the video game, but what are the components of Doom or anything, even for that matter, some of the software, some of the systems, I should say, on your phones. What are the components? Well, we have the components of the hardware. So Doom's got to basically exist on hardware somewhere, right? We have the software, and that's where we are right now, is trying to basically build some of the software. We've got data, processes, and people. So let's just talk a little bit about this. I think it's kind of important to give you some background of this. So when it comes to the hardware, of course, this is the machinery or whatever that your system is ultimately based on. Now, you have installed Python either on your laptops, in which case your laptop is the hardware. If you're using Python anywhere, then your hardware is in the cloud, and you're actually using something like infrastructure as a service, or IaaS. Maybe it's more platform as a service too. But either way, if you're able to log onto a console and type, and it's not on your computer, that software or that computer, I should say, is in the cloud. Your hardware is in the cloud. So that's one thing that Doom needs to have, or Python idle. It's got to basically have a hardware to run on. Then, of course, software. We kind of got the different types of software. System software here is kind of more like your operating system. Now, in the case of Python, by the way, Python can certainly run on Windows, because I suspect most of you are running it. Python can run on Linux. Python can run on Unix. Python, I'm sure there's probably other ones. But anyway, so there's some of the system software or operating systems. And then the other thing is idle, I suspect, is you sort of building your own application software. So that's what software is. To use it sort of another, even software, of course, breaks down to different areas. You've got, they didn't say it here, but you've got software that works across many different types of organizations. So for example, I would say that almost every company I know has got some kind of payroll software. That would be horizontal, right? Any company out there has got payroll software. Only certain companies have something like D2L, which is learning management software. So it's vertical to particular industries, right? Starkeys is a company here that makes hearing aids, that probably has got very specific software that's only for that particular industry. That is a vertical software. And then legacy is stuff that was there before. So as a guy myself that's been in the industry a while, I've got to see legacy software like the old mainframe software when we moved to something called client server. And now as we move to the cloud, I get to sort of see again legacy software. In the cloud, we're looking back at the legacy of client systems, or sometimes even mainframe. Legacy systems are the systems that were there before. Data. One of the reasons I felt compelled to talk about this now is that when we're talking about variables, we're talking about data being passed around the system. Oh, to continue my Doom analogy, Doom would probably be definitely more vertical, right? I mean, not every company is going to have Doom installed. It's going to be more vertical. Data would be the data that's used in this software. We're about to talk about variables soon, so I wanted to basically talk a little bit right now about data. Here they're talking about data sort of more in a database way, and we will be able to do some of this kind of stuff in Python, although mostly when you're dealing with databases, certainly in your educational career, you'll likely deal with something like Access or SQL Server or Oracle or Postgres. There's a whole bunch of different MariaDB, a bunch of different databases out there. And that's kind of what they're saying here. When they're saying data stored in tables, they're kind of meaning more like this kind of database idea. We're going to be looking at data stored in memory. Now I'm going to skip this process for a second and then go to people. You are a people. I am a people. It's difficult for me to imagine software at this stage in our species development that is basically going to be not using people. So there's always some kind of person component, people feeding information in, people wanting information out, right? Obviously, Doom wouldn't be a very good program without people, right? So, or system, I should say, without people. So we are definitely a part of the components. And then finally, this part here is usually for us in IT, the hardest part to understand. Honestly, most people in IT, they really geek out on hardware. They geek out on the various software stuff. We ourselves are the geeks and the people, and then we're looking at data. Well, the thing is, we need to understand what are the processes in the business world that we're trying to emulate. So let's think about D2L for a second. What is the process that's trying to emulate? Most courses before D2L would have had you guys doing your homework and then giving it to the instructor. The instructor would then grade the homework, write a nice little A on the paper, give it back, and then write that grade into a grade book. And then at the end of the course, the instructor looks at all your grades, writes out what your final GPA is for that grade, or sorry, basically what your grade is, and then gives it to the registration people who would then eventually basically tell you what your GPA was, right? That's a process, and D2L and the registration systems effectively manage that process. I can't remember if I said this or not, but D2L is an example. It's a vertical system, and it's an example actually of a learning management system, or LMS. There are other learning management systems out there too, like Blackboard, Moodle. Some of those do the same thing as well. And they're all basically emulating all the systems that are involved in managing your learning. So it's learning management. All right, I think that's it. That's all I wanted to talk to in this particular video, and this particular point was all basically about the fact that please remember in the back of your mind that information system components, 5 of them: hardware, software, data, processes, and then people. All right.